Hello and welcome to the Meta Assessment Module training for Level 1. This will be step-by-step instructions for you to input your assessment data into Meta. And it is mainly about data entry. You'll get a little bit about assessment in general, but we're starting on this Learning Assessment Committee homepage so you can see where you can find some more resources just generally about assessment. There's a bunch of documents in the header here that can be helpful to you. There's a whole lot more on this web page as well. Of course, if you need other help with assessment, you can always contact your assessment coordinators for help. And one of the things that we have here on our Learning Assessment Committee homepage is a link to Meta. So I'm going to get there by hitting that link. And this is the login page. Keep in mind there are printed instructions that do basically the same thing that I'm doing here, and those will be available on the Learning Assessment Committee webpage. I also usually send things out to FAS, so any training materials come out via FAS email as well. As far as a browser, pretty much any common browser, I would say not Internet Explorer. But I'm using Chrome right now. I also use Safari with Meta. You can use Firefox with Meta. Those should all work just fine. And one thing you'll want to know before you're sitting down to enter data is a little bit about how your department wants to enter data. So this system is designed for an individual instructor to sit down and enter their individual section. And then those sections can be aggregated on different levels of assessment. Some departments aggregate right from the beginning, so you might pool the data from many instructors and then one person enters that all at once. So there are a couple of different ways that different departments approach it. Before you sit down to do this, you should make sure you know what your department's way of doing it will be. So talk to your department chair, or there may be another assessment lead in your department that you can talk to. If the department has not made any specific decision about this, that could be something that you call in the assessment coordinators to a department meeting, and we can kind of talk about that, like what would be the best option. So we'll go ahead and move forward, and I'm just going to show you how the system's really set up. And it's possible to tweak things a bit if your department wants to do things a slightly different way. So we're at our login page. We put in our email, make sure it's the @peralta.edu. You have to type in all of that. And it is important that you use a Peralta email. So the district policy is that we all have to use our Peralta email addresses. Put in your password. If you don't know your password, most faculty have access to the system right now, and so could just click the forgot your password link. And in that case, what it's going to do is send a link to your Peralta email. And then when you click that link, you'll be able to change your password in the system. If you click the forgot your password and it gives you a user not found message, then that means that you're not actually in the system, and you can contact your assessment coordinators to get an account for that. So I'm just going to go ahead now and log in. And it lands on course level curriculum. That's the default. So if you want to change that, you can come up here, click on curriculum, and it gives you a drop down. You could pull it down to assessment. And what this is showing us is just everything that I have entered for assessment already. If you don't have anything entered yet, it's not going to show you anything. And then it'll distinguish between, like, there are a couple of drafts that I had created here for training purposes. These ones that say active, active means it was already approved through the Learning Assessment Committee process. If there's anything that says in review, that means it's still in the process of getting approved, and then it will say active once it is approved. So this is just showing you what you've entered already. And to create something new, you're going to come over here to create proposal. So this is where you'll start anything that you're doing in CurricuNet. So whether it's curriculum work or assessment work, you always start with create proposal. So let's do that. And proposal type is a drop-down menu. So I'm selecting here, and I would have to scroll all the way to the bottom to get assessment, but while we're here, I'm just going to show you if you needed to update a course or create a new course or modify your program. That's all stuff that you would start here as well. I'm going to scroll all the way down to assessments, and we're going to choose Laney Assessment 1, SLO assessment. So this again is meant for like one instructor entering stuff for their section, but if your department chooses to, you could aggregate on this level as well. And that's something that I could, talk to whoever the person is who's aggregating the data. The process would be the same as what I'm presenting in this video. There would just be a little bit of a difference to the title of the document. So I'll show you that in a second. So we're going to click next. And it is important that you click next. Don't hit enter, don't hit return, right? Click next. And then you're going to choose your division from a drop-down. Now you notice I have a lot of options. That's because I have administrative access. You probably only have one option there. So click your division. I'm just going to click mine. And then department, again, you probably only have one unless you have MinQuals to be able to teach in multiple departments, but there's probably just one there. So I'm going to pick my department, which is biology. And then for the module title, eventually CurricuNet is going to be set up so that it gives you a title based on what you've entered. But currently it does not do that. So we are using a naming convention. And I think I mentioned already that there are printed instructions for all of this. The printed instructions have several examples of what your titles might look like, but I'll just run you through a couple of choices. So you're always going to start with your department designation. So that's biology. And then I'm just going to make up a course here for a second, just to do the title. And so you're going to have the department designation, the course number, and then your section number. So I'm just going to make up one to make a point here. So it's a 5-digit section number. If you taught multiple sections and assessed in all of them, just pick one section number to use. The only reason that you're using this section number, like nobody's ever going to go back and check and see who taught that section. It's only to help distinguish the title. Like we can't have two of the same titles in the system. So it's important to put something in there that will distinguish it. Now, if you prefer, you can feel free to put your name in there instead. So what I usually do, and what you probably noticed on the previous page, I just put my name in there. So you can do that too, if you are comfortable with it. Otherwise, pick a section. And then you will do the SLO number. So I'm just going to say I'm doing SLO2. If you aren't sure what the SLO number is in the system, just go ahead and enter something and you can double check it and change it later. So this title will be something that you can edit, but we're just going to pick something to start with. So we've got our department, our course number, either a name or a section number, the SLO number, and then the semester and the year. Okay. Now, if this were an aggregate, so let's say your department enters things at the first level by aggregating data from multiple instructors, then what you could do here is just put ag in front of either the name of the person who's doing the entering, or again, that could just be one of the section numbers that had been assessed, right? So you only need this if you're entering data from multiple instructors into this one proposal. And the proposal is just what we call what we're entering here, right? So you've got department number, department designation, course number, aggregate if it is one, otherwise you're going to leave that out, section number or name if you prefer, SLO number, semester, and year. And then we click next, and then it gives you a chance to double check that that's what you want, and then you hit create proposal, and it lands you on the main tab. So all of these things, so main, assessment methods, tools, assessment results, those are tabs. Anything that's in here is called a field. So you'll hear me use those terms. These are the tabs. These are all the fields whatever's inside the tab. And notice how some things are orange, and notice how these boxes are orange. So the orange stuff are the launch requirements. So in order to launch this into the system and have it start going through the approval process, you have to enter certain things, otherwise it won't launch. There are some things, like for example, these areas where there would be numbers to enter, they're not technically a launch requirement. All of the colleges are using the same system, but they might use it slightly differently. So Laney wants you to fill in all the blanks, whether or not it's a launch requirement. So these are not technically launch requirements, but you should fill them in. And then again, anything that's in orange definitely needs to be filled in. And many of these things are from drop downs, right? And I'm not going to fill these in right now, but I'll come back to that later. So then you click, your subject is just your department, and then choose your course. Now you notice there is not actually a Biology 12, so I was like, oh, I made a mistake. I need to go back and change my title. No problem. I can change that. I meant to type Biology 10. And then I come down here, pick Biology 10. For version, you're usually going to pick current. 99% of the time you're picking current, so we're just going to do that. And then choose course outcome. So I'm going to pick SLO1. And again, I say, oh, up here I said SLO2. I didn't realize that my curriculum said that this was SLO number 1. No big deal. I'm just going to come up here and change that. And then I could pick a co-contributor if I wanted to. So a co-contributor would just be a person who can also edit this draft. So if you don't have any reason to want someone else to be able to edit the draft, don't worry about it. Otherwise, you could search for your co-contributor's name here and add them if you wanted to. And then when you get to the end of that tab, notice how it turned green. I filled in all the launch requirements at this point. So you can click Save, and it's just saving it as a draft in the system now. And again, all these are still orange because I haven't finished them yet. So at this point, what I'm actually going to do is go over to one of my drafts where I had already entered some information, so I can kind of show you a little bit more about kind of concepts of assessment as we go. So I'm going to get out of this draft for a second and go to a different one. Okay, so I'm going to use this one. And here, again, you can see what the title is. I had already chosen from the drop downs the semester and the year assessed. Notice how it doesn't show me a save at the bottom because I haven't changed anything. If I do change something, it's going to show me that Save tab. And it's kind of hard to lose something in the system if you try and click out of a tab and like, let me just show you just to make point. I'm going to change this, and then it pops up with the save. And if I don't click that, if I forget to, and I click out here, it just pops up and asks me if I want to save it. So I'm actually going to discard those changes because I didn't want to change what that SLO was. I'm just going to go back and to the main tab and check. Yeah, so it did it correctly, right? So let's see, I think we're all finished with the main tab then, except you do want to enter these numbers. So let me talk about that for a second. So again, it isn't technically a launch requirement, but you should enter these. So the number of students assessed is just how many students actually participated in that assessment. It's possible you have students in the class that didn't take that particular exam or didn't turn in that particular assignment. So the number that goes here is how many students actually participated in this assessment. And then there's the students meeting success criteria. If you've already analyzed your data, then you know that. If you don't know that yet, then skip it and come back and fill it in later. Number of students on the roster is just how many students were officially enrolled in the class on the day that you did the assessment. And if you're doing an aggregate of a lot of people's sections, or if you're just not 100% sure what your roster said on that day, if it says 31 versus 32, it doesn't matter that much. So the precision of these numbers is not super critical, but ballpark numbers would be very helpful. So make sure you do enter something to the best of your ability there. And then when you're finished with that tab, click over to Methods and Tools. So on the Methods and Tools, there are a whole bunch of options. And if you read through all these options for the assessment method and you don't see what you did here, you can always click Other, and then it's going to pop up with a text box to tell you, or so that you can provide more details about what you actually did. And you notice that here I chose exam, and I said I did a certain number of test questions that are on the particular topic. And you could pick multiple assessment methods, as long as you're picking what you actually used that semester. Like pick what you really, really used to do the assessment. So you probably have maybe max of 1 or 2 in a given semester, probably not a whole bunch of stuff. So you pick them, put in the details. There is a known glitch in the system where if you click something and then unclick it, it doesn't want to let you save. So the company is already aware of that. By the time you're hearing this, it may already be fixed, but basically what you would do is just read through carefully so that you know what you want to pick before you actually go ahead and choose it. And then the worst thing that can happen is it's just not going to let you save that. If you click something and then unclick it, it won't let you save that tab. It still saves your whole draft, but it just won't save that tab. So make your choice carefully, and then you don't have to re-enter that later. And the other important thing on this tab is success criteria. So this is really important because you want to make sure you're choosing this ahead of actually analyzing your data. So your data analysis should not be what guides you to create your success criteria, right? So you should choose your success criteria before you analyze those data. And you're just picking what level you would like to see from your students. So it doesn't matter, in the end, it doesn't matter whether you met the success criteria or not. The success criteria are just giving you something to aim for. If the success criteria are not met, you're going to create an action plan to try and resolve that for the next time that you assess this SLO. So it's not a big deal. So pick something you think is realistic to shoot for, and then you can always, update those success criteria as you get more experience doing these assessments. So there are a couple of components to writing success criteria. One is you want to kind of have something for the outcome overall. And the other piece is what's the level of student performance that you would want to see. So we're saying at least 75% of students will score 70% or better on the chosen exam questions. So the 75% of students is like, how many of my students do I really want to achieve this level to consider the outcome successful? And then what level am I asking to the students to actually perform at? So the 70% level. Now these numbers could be drastically different depending on your course. So if you teach like a very beginning level course, maybe those numbers are lower. Like you're not expecting that same level of success if you're teaching a beginning level course. It may be that you're teaching a laboratory course where safety is a huge issue. So maybe your success criteria are that 100% of students have to be, using everything safely in the laboratory. So whatever you think is appropriate. But again, choose that before you actually analyze your data. And then one thing that you can do on this tab is upload these exam questions. So typically, when you're saying what your assessment methods are, or you graded something by a rubric, you're going to go ahead and upload that rubric or upload those test questions. And so you do that at the bottom of the tab here. So there's an attachment section at the bottom of some of these tabs, not all of them. So we're going to go ahead and click select. And upload our exam questions. So it's going to show me that right here. And then maybe I have a rubric also. I can upload my rubric for grading those particular questions. Say upload those files. And now, as I scroll back down, it would let me look at those files as well. And in addition to showing at this tab where I uploaded them, I can also go to the Attach Files tab, and they show up there. So I may have added files at different tabs. It will show on the tab on which you added it, and all of them will show on the Attach Files tab. So this kind of gives you, at the end, you can look at what files you attached and then just double check like, oh, is there something that I missed? And then you could upload it here as well. So it doesn't really matter whether you upload it all on the Attach Files tab or upload it on the other tabs. It's just kind of convenient. It reminds you when you get down to the bottom of this tab, like, oh, I could include these attachments. So that's fine. So now we're finished with this tab. So we're going to go to Assessment Results. And again, it's going to show us the outcome as a read-only piece of information there. And we're going to want to identify our delivery method. This is really important. And there are certain levels where we're supposed to disaggregate data. And that is important for our service to students. It's also really essential for the accreditation process. So this particular class was a face-to-face day class. If I also taught the same class as a face-to-face evening, I would want to enter that separately, like as a separate create proposal. And then I could aggregate those later and be able to say, like, were there any differences between the students and how they experience things in the day class versus the evening class and their performance on the student learning outcomes. So we would want to be able to disaggregate that. So you can bring it all together here, but it will be important moving into the future to work on disaggregation of data. So if you've got something to enter right now that is not disaggregated, go ahead and enter it. But for the future, keep in mind that you'll want to split up your day versus your evening sections, certainly online versus face-to-face. You want to split those up. Any dual enrollment courses should be entered separately so that we can then compare them at some point later on and say, okay, great, the face-to-face students are doing really well with this. The online students didn't do as well with this. Why is that? And then you might have a different action plan for the online version of the course, just so that we're meeting all of our students' needs, no matter what the delivery method is. So that's important. And it's also doing a little calculation of the numbers that we entered on the main tab. So you may not have had your students meeting success criteria yet. Like if you didn't know that before you sat down, you're going to figure it out now. So we can see, I just wanted to show you a little bit of what the results and analysis might look like. So this could look like a lot of different things, but just as an example, I'm saying how many students out of 30, so I had 30 students that participated in the assessment, 9 out of 30 scored an A on those particular questions, 11 out of 30 scored a B, 3 out of 30 scored a C. And so then I had 23 out of the 30 students that scored a C or better. And so that met my success criteria. If it didn't meet the success criteria, I still ended up identifying a learning gap. So it's not about whether or not you meet your success criteria. It's really deeper than that. So you'll notice, so the results part is kind of numbers, right? The analysis is more just a brief narrative on what I feel like I saw as an instructor. So I'm just saying the majority of students could correctly define the terms, but some had trouble fully grasping the depth of these topics and like being able to use these terms in an appropriate way. So there was still a learning gap. And there may be some overlap between what you type into the results and analysis text box versus what you type into the learning gaps box. But the learning gaps should be specifically what are the things that you're going to try to address with an action plan, right? So the results and analysis is just what happened. The learning gaps are the specific parts of what happened that I would like to address in an action plan. And I'm going to do that on a different tab, but right now I'm going to say what those learning gaps were. So I'm saying here that I found students could memorize definitions, but they really couldn't fully answer the questions that required more nuance to their understanding. So that was the learning gap. And again, if I want to attach anything on this tab, I could, and I don't have anything right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the reflection. So for most people on the reflection, you're mostly going to say NA for not applicable because there's not a bunch of data in the system already. But if you are aware of older data where you assessed this same outcome, you can write something about that. So for example, we had assessed this outcome before, and we had a previous action plan where we said we needed to more clearly word the questions, and then add in some more questions that got at, more subtleties. And that did result in improvement in the percent of students meeting our success criteria this time, but it also showed us more specifically where the students are struggling. And so we're going to use that information in making our next action plan. So basically the reflection is saying, if you've assessed this before and you had an action plan after that assessment, was that action plan successful? That's what you're trying to address here. So did your previous action plan work? And then say something about that. For most of us, since we don't have a lot of data in the system yet, you're going to be saying NA for not applicable. But as this, becomes more common that we're doing these assessments and entering data in the system, there will be additional things you could say here. So if you don't have anything to say right now, that's fine. You do have to write something in the box, so that's why we say put NA. And then action plan. So here it's going to show you the results and analysis that you entered. And I should be able to grab that and make it bigger. I'm not sure why that isn't working right now, but that's okay. I can still scroll through it there. Or you could always just go back to the tab and read that again. So what you really need to do here is pick what your action plan is. So you'll notice you have two sets of checkboxes. The first part is actions to take at the course level. And again, just like on the assessment methods and tools tab, if you check a checkbox and then you decide you want to uncheck it, it might give you some trouble saving. So read them all carefully first and then decide what you're going to pick. Otherwise, you might just have to discard any changes and just start it over again. Just for this tab though, you're not going to lose the whole thing. So once you click something, it's going to ask you to write in some additional detail. So I'm just going to pick one thing here. So let's see. I'm going to say revise activities, and then I could include some details in here. So for example, more assignments on distinguishing hypothesis and theory prior to final assessment. So basically the students would be practicing more before they got to their final, like whatever you're using for assessment, whatever's the tool that you're going to use. And for actions to take beyond the course level, this is pretty uncommon that you would choose one of these now. On the other levels of assessment, it's more likely that you'd choose something as beyond the course level, but you can take a look and see if any of this is relevant. In both sections, you can always pick other. If your assessment gives you reason to revise the course outline, then you would want to pick that one, right? And then in the future, you would have some plan for like when you're actually going to revise that course outline on that basis. And then at the very bottom, you just need to pick the next assessment. So your next assessment, If it's something super critical, if you're finding that there's something that you really want the students to do better with right away, you could pick next semester or like the following year. For the most part, we're supposed to be on a 3-year cycle of doing our assessment, sometimes 4 years. It depends a little bit. Laney's changing its cycle right now, but sticking to a 3-year plan would be a really good idea. And then for sure, you would be done on a 4-year cycle. So in your next assessment, it might just be 3 years later. Like if this course has 3 SLOs and I could assess one year, the next one the next year, the next one the year after that, and then I come back to the first one again in my next cycle. So you could just have it be 3 years out, or if it's something super critical, you might pick sometime sooner than that. And keep in mind, all the SLOs for a given course should get assessed within that 3-year period. So if you have more than 3 SLOs, you might need to do like 2 a year or like 1 every semester or something like that to make sure that you are meeting the requirements. But for now, if it doesn't let me, it does this sometimes where I can't scroll through everything. So I can just use the arrow keys on my keyboard. And that's fine. So I'm just going to pick spring of 2020 and then click save. And then you can see all the boxes are filled in. And for anyone who does not have administrative access, you're not even going to see this codes and dates tab, so don't even worry about that. Once you've finished your action plan, you can always just double check that you attach the files that you intended to attach. All my boxes are green. I did make sure that I filled in these numbers. So even though those were not launch requirements, I do want to make sure I fill them in. And now you can see your launch button is available. So you can go ahead and launch it at this point, and it would start going through the review process. If you end up with a draft that you're not happy with and you just want to start it over, you can always just delete a draft here as well. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So it probably takes you less time to enter all of your data than it does for me to explain how to enter your data. So hopefully it's quick and easy for you, and you can always contact the assessment coordinators if you need help. Be aware of any training sessions that might be coming up where you could drop by. Those kinds of bits of information usually come out via email. You can also check the Learning Assessment Committee's webpage for any additional information. Hope that helps.